There we go. So we're starting 11:50. We are a little bit behind. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. That 10 minutes took a little bit longer than what I expected, so we are running a couple of minutes behind. I'm just going to dive straight into this. From HMRC, we have Alan Daly, one of the Deputy Directors, here to provide us with an update on CDS. I hope both what's happening now and what we can expect in the future. Alan? Don't know if you prefer microphones or those ones and see how that goes. Okay, there's one there if you need it.
Thank you very much. Morning, everybody. How are you all? Delighted to be able to join you today. I think I was originally going to be later in the day, but now I get to do the HMRC thing first, which is to say I can't really say anything much about pre-budget and so on. But we'll do our best to tell you something useful. Okay. So that's me, Alan Daly. I'm a Deputy Director in HMRC in the Borders and Trade team. I am the Programme Director for a thing called Single Customs Platform, not to be confused with the other single trade window thing, nothing to do with me either, can't answer anything about that. I also mentioned at the bottom there, I'm the Interim Business Platform Owner for CDS, and that's a nod to the future, and I'll hopefully explain a little bit more about that as we go. Single Customs Platform is the latest iteration of the project to introduce CDS, to decommission Chief, and to generally make your lives easier, although I suspect from having heard earlier on around the complexity of customs is that's probably an unlikely thing to occur. I just want to start off really by reminding you perhaps, or perhaps triggering some of you, that the story as to how we got to where we are with CDS. I was saying a moment ago, this year CDS is 10 years old. It was conceived in 2014-15. That's when we first started spending money at it. So, you know, it's only taken 10 years. It's not bad in the great scheme of things. But hopefully the experience hasn't been universally dreadful. But it's worth just having a quick look back over how we got there. I'll tell you a little bit about the Single Customs Platform Programme, and as we're coming to the end of that, what we're looking to do going forward. There is the caveat, though, that obviously until the budget and the spending review is announced next week, the spending review particularly sets out the departmental spending for years ahead. I can set out in broad terms what we would like to do, what we have pitched to do, but of course I can't guarantee, I can't guarantee anything really until that's announced. So I won't speculate too much about what that might look like. This is a terrible graph that works much better on the screen on the Power BI. So I will try to help you through this. But just in terms of numbers, so to give you some sense, this is since CDS's inception, okay? It's lost in the mist of time who made the first declaration on CDS. Probably would have been Northern Ireland 5 years ago, something like that, 6 years ago maybe. But since then, nearly 7,000 successful declarants. Quite impressive, I thought. 155 million completed declarations and duty calculated at just over £32 billion. To give you a sense, steady state now, now that we've finally made all the declarations are now happening on CDS, we're expecting about 100 million declarations a year, import and export. So it's not insignificant in size and scale and volumes. There is a pattern, as you will know, because many of your firms will work Monday to Friday, and so there's more activity in the middle of the week, much less at the weekend. Tuesday is a busy day. Thursday is a busy day. I'll leave you to speculate as to what happens on Wednesday. Right, I'll try and do this. Hopefully you can still hear me. This is a time sequence. That is January 2022, that bar. These are hopefully aligned, so they both start the same day. This is last Friday, ending last week. On the top you have imports, on the bottom you have exports. What you see in any given week is the total percentage of declarations on Chief in the sort of pink, and the total percentage of declarations on CDS in the green. Is that green? Is that coming out as green to you? Okay. So that, and the purple line here is the total percentage on CDS. Sorry, that's not the percentage. Oh, it is a percentage actually, yeah. So what you can see over time, tootling along, and then you all did a fine job and got us across the line on import declarations. On the same scale, effectively, you can see the same export journey. Interesting here, that I think that was around the tail end of, or the middle of 2023. There is, by the way, you can't see it because there aren't enough pixels. At the top of every single one of these lines, there is a tiny, tiny little green line. So the number of declarations on export declarations on CDS was minute. That was the first time we got to over 1,000 in the week. So that was, I think, June 2020. June 2024. At this point, in December 23, that was the 21%. Now, bearing in mind that we had obviously wanted to get export declarations across as soon as, that was a little bit of a low point. We were a bit concerned at that stage because, as you can see, there'd been a bit of an uptick, gone along quite nicely, and then there was this dip. That's Christmas, by the way. That's the week of Christmas. So we were really hoping that was going to be a seasonal effect. And then everybody went mad. And I think around this point, we got to over 50% of the declarations on CDS. And barring this minor little blip here, which to this day I don't really quite understand, the percentage carried on, and we are effectively now making all UK declarations on CDS. We had a 45-day period, those of you who were involved, so declarations that existed on Chief after the 17th of June, 45 days to clear those out. We fully expected that would be more trouble than it was, that it was going to be a lot of trouble. We had feedback from various trade organisations that things like strategic exports get stuck in the bureaucracy and DBT and so on. Can I just say again, thank you for any of you who were involved in clearing those. It was really, really straightforward. Everybody wrote in, and we were able to effectively, at the start of September, say that Chief was no longer processing customs declarations. One of the things that I do want to commend those of you who have been involved in it is the cooperation that we have had with external trade bodies and partners and organisations during the period of exports migration. If you look at the steepness of this line, I know that people were already familiar with CDS at this stage. Hopefully the transition was more straightforward. But still, there's a lot of work to do there. We made a deliberate effort in the middle of 2023 to try to improve the relationship that we had with our external trade partners. I don't think it had always been what we would have liked it to be before, and I think the transition to import migration probably reflected that. We made a real effort, and many of the people in this room I know will have contributed to that. We had a specific joint partner arrangement trying to address those particular issues, understand the concerns, the roadblocks and so on, and have a really open dialogue. So if you were part of that, if you helped to inform that dialogue and conversation, can I just say thank you? It made it an awful lot easier. Quick feedback, does that graph work? Just the way I've ever used it again. No? Is it? Yeah? Fine. Maybe the colour scheme might be different. Okay, so just to let you know, I touched on this already, but Single Customs Platform is the latest incarnation of various things to transition from Chief to CDS. So there are three parts to it. The first is to migrate. Hurrah, we've done it. Thank you very much. Second part is around decommissioning Chief. This is the bit that I look after in particular. So Chief is this fantastic web, I should have brought the sort of network diagram, but it's a bit terrifying. Chief over time had evolved to do lots more than just customs declarations. So some of the functionality of Chief was used, for example, the whole duty deferment account process was used not just to deal with customs duties, but also to things like excise duty, which is a separate thing, although it wouldn't feel like it perhaps. So we had 96 components, a network across HMRC, across other government departments and to other actors and partners. And ultimately we needed to unpick each one of those without breaking anything else. And these are things that are kind of important, like trade statistics, which go to inform GDP. So getting those wrong, you're going to get noticed. At the alcohol and tobacco warehousing declaration system, which isn't necessarily related to imports or exports, but it does account for £13 billion a year of exchequer revenue. Again, if something goes wrong there, you'll get noticed. One of the complexities, as you might imagine, from effectively a financial services organisation like HMRC, is to make sure that all of that accounting happens in the right way. So not only that we collect the money, but actually it gets applied to the right accounting. And with a lot of transactions and a lot of high-value transactions, that's particularly important, because I guess if you're an importer or you're liable to VAT, you want to make sure that what's being accounted for gets allocated to the right account. So immense complexity in chief decommissioning to make sure that all of those internal and external stakeholders were aware of that. The good thing is that we are now, of those 96 things that needed to be decommissioned or decoupled, we have 13 left to do. We've been holding the line to say we'll be completed by March next year, but I can confidently tell you we'll be finished before March. We probably reckon by January we'll be putting an eye on, we'll be dotting the I's and crossing the T's. Last two big things for this, so there were three things. The last version of CDS removed the dual running elements, so the cross-checking between Chief and CDS, so that no longer exists. We have a thing called VAT 908, for those of you involved in the importation of fuel oils and the release of that from, so it's a duty on fuel oil. It's about £1 billion of revenue, so that's the other one that we're keeping a really close eye on. That's going live at the end of this month. And then one that's particularly internally focused, a thing called Chief MSS, which is the data repository that feeds a huge number of reporting across government. That's actually being decommissioned as well in about 3 days. At this stage, it is entirely invisible to you, to your colleagues, your customers, but it's not been straightforward. Maybe this is true everywhere, but government generally doesn't decommission stuff. When you finish using an old IT system, the tendency is to just leave it in the corner, because somebody might need it at some stage, and just hope it doesn't break on your watch. But we took the view that there's considerable savings coming from decommissioning it, and second-order savings by reducing and removing some of the complexity, and that's a theme I'll come back to. So I'm calling that one out as a win at this stage. 13 left to go. I got excited this morning. One of my team emailed me and told me about something. I said, are we down to 12? And he went, no, not yet. That's end of this week. But anyway. The last big part of Single Customs Platform is around delivering these critical functional changes to CDS. Well, functional and non-functional, actually. The distinction there is functional are things that you find useful, non-functional are things that effectively make sure it stays upright and pointing forward and operates properly when you need it. This, I suspect, has been the bane of your lives if you've been involved in CDS for the last couple of years, and probably will continue to be for a while longer. But we have two big releases coming yet for the remainder of this financial year, one around December and one penciled in for March. We would love to do more releases a year. One of the reasons that we can't is because it takes quite a lot of downtime. And understandably, that's not great for business, it's not great for the customer experience. So typically we have packaged our releases into 4 major releases a year. We ask, what do we get, 8 hours of downtime or something on a Saturday night into Sunday. because the view is that's the quietest time. One of the things that we want to try and do, and again I will come to this a little bit more looking forward, is can we release more useful functionality more often with less downtime? And that's where part of the investment in the non-functional requirements for CDS will come. Des mentioned it earlier. We have a new government. We have a new minister. We have new ministerial priorities. The caveat is obviously, as I said again, I can't know what we will be able to spend on CDS beyond next March until the spending review comes out. The internal business planning process in HMRC goes through, so a big number will come out on the 30th, then there'll be a process within HMRC to turn that big number into actual investment portfolios across the whole of HMRC. It's a really geeky point, but borders and trade within HMRC has been in a ring fence up till now as part of EU exit. So we have not had to compete with the rest of HMRC for funding. We've just had to go and convince the Treasury to give us EU exit funding. But from next year, we're not in that ring fence anymore. So that business planning process is going to be quite critical. That'll take us through to Christmas and so on. So we won't probably have certainty about what we can and will invest in CDS till the early part of the new year. So there will be a challenge from there through to March to get us to a position where we can turn that into planning. So we're doing lots of scenario work at the moment, working through the options. So pretty much we're confident that whatever the settlement eventually becomes, then we will have fairly firm plans for the first quarter, and then we'll continue to evolve those plans. Our Minister, James Murray, has given us 3 priorities. These are my words, not his, so, but these are interpretation. He did come to see us. He came to visit us in Leeds, where I'm based. He also came to see us in Stratford, in East London, which, if you haven't been, is lovely. You should go. 3 things he wants. He's the Minister for HMRC. He wants to improve the customer experience. We're interpreting that, and I think he's confirmed that that's both external customers and internal customers. This is not just in the customs space, it's across all of the customer-facing services that HMRC provides. This is where I have to do the obligatory call-out to say, if you haven't, you should really download the HMRC app. It's fab. It's really good. If you have to do a tax return, you can do it on the app. Anyway, there you go. Somebody let them know that I've given you that plug. The second thing is around efficiency across HMRC and government. Who would not want more efficiency? But it's a particular focus clearly for this government in terms of understanding where they can get more bang for their buck. The across government is just as important. Actually, many of you will know that the border is not really a thing. And I'm sure I hope it's true everywhere else, but many agencies have an interest at the border. If any of you are involved in the introduction of SPS checks at the moment, you know that's going really well. As DEFRA. Oh, it's being recorded, isn't it? So one of the challenges is coordination across government at the border. And that's something that we're really looking to insert ourselves in, because all roads lead to HMRC and our national clearance hub. So while others may well impose the pain, we end up feeling the pain, and that pain is often felt by you or your customers and so on. So we have a vested interest in trying to make sure that efficiency across government, both to drive down costs, but also to actually improve that customer experience and to close the tax gap. That was the third priority from our Minister. So there is a lot of focus, and I'm sure you will see more of this, on upstream compliance, making sure that people are doing the right thing, so making it easy to do the right thing, making it much more difficult to do the wrong thing. And this is as true in the world of goods across the border as anywhere else. So we're looking at opportunities to invest in ways that support those priorities. The other challenge for us is to move from this program-led delivery and development into something approaching a steady state. So the Single Customs Platform program is, at the moment, due to finish in March. Question mark as to whether the program will continue beyond that. It may not. Again, depends on the outcome of the spending review. But at some stage, we have to take this Brexit-fueled, let's put it in a program and get it done at speed and so on, to something which actually looks a bit more normal. I believe there was, weirdly, still, before we started decommissioning it, a backlog of requests for new features on Chief. But we had gone to a position, at least with Chief, where there was a steady state. There was a way of planning the investment and changes in a slightly more steady state way. And that's a challenge for us because as a borders and trade team, it was tiny pre-EU exit, and now it's much bigger. And so there are organizational challenges, there are skills challenges. You need a very different set of, not a very different, but you need a slightly different set of skills to run something on a steady state with slightly less frantic investment choices and deadlines than you do to meet, harsh, firmly set external deadlines. So we're effectively, these are the guardrails that I think we are setting out for CDS going forward. So by this I mean from April next year. So we will have to become more benefits driven around our investment choices. And that's both in terms of the total size of benefits, of potential benefits, but also looking at the payback time. So some of you may be aware we already, within Single Customs Platform, we do quite an extensive piece of benefits analysis and management. It's a fairly standard, for those of you who've been involved in programs, it's a really standard piece of sort of the program management and project management toolkit. But was less important during EU exit because there was legal commitments that had to be met. And in some respects, the value for money for doing something mattered less than the fact that it was legally required of us. Going forward, we have to shift that mindset a little bit. So we will look to do things that have a payback and to understand what that period will be and where those benefits will accrue. Now, they're not just benefits to HMRC or to government, they are benefits to the trade ecosystem. And one of my asks today is for you and with your customers and with your colleagues is to start thinking about how we might express those benefits. So, if you want to make a change to CDS so that it does something else, how would we express what that benefit is? Who would it land with? What size of benefit might it be? How quickly will we pay it back, and so on. And we'll be looking at ways of trying to make sure that we're including that customer, that user experience into that benefit analysis. On the basis that if the benefit accrues to you, to your customers, and so on, then that ultimately feeds back into the real economy. And, if we can simplify things for you and your customers, take some cost out for you and your customers, then that it frees up money to be spent on doing something slightly more useful. We will, however, also be taking a look at the benefits across government and to HMRC. At the moment, our benefits approach is to look at technology simplification, internal, I'll call them compliance benefits. So that's for our customer service and compliance colleagues. And also then to look at specifically looking at the benefits of chief decommissioning. Well, that's going to go off the register at the end of March, so we will have to take a fresh look at that. But we really do want to get that external perspective as well, so please watch out for opportunities to feed into that. That will probably be coming through JCCC and some of the other forums where ACITA is active. So the four pits then that we are specifically looking at to support those ministerial pledges. So one is those essential functional changes, both essential to you as users or your customers or declarants, essential also internally. So there are things that CDS does at the moment that it doesn't do very well. Let me put it that way. And that creates either some internal risk to HMRC or creates effort and noise and so on. So we will need to deliver those. I touched earlier on about investing in the stability and the resilience of the platform. CDS is fantastically resilient. I hope your experience has been that it has been much more stable over the last couple of years than maybe it had been early doors, but we know we have to do more. One of the things that EU exit has exposed is how tightly coupled the border is. You have this very complex, tightly coupled system with very, very little room for error. We jokingly describe turning Kent into a car park as a very bad outcome. But it doesn't take much. We know that in terms of the volumes of movements, especially across the short straits, it really doesn't take very much to back the system up. And we're very sensitive to that. So we know that we need to make sure that CDS is more resilient, performs well, is right-sized, investment in things around making it slightly more elastic, which means that it responds dynamically to load and so on. That drives out cost for us. It also allows, for example, some of those investments around things like blue-green deployment, which means that we can now do more zero downtime updates. That introduces some complexity in terms of managing that, but if we could deploy functional and other changes every week and you never notice them happening other than getting a note from us to say we're doing it, but there was no downtime, then that feels like there's a benefit in there, but we will be investing in the stability and the resilience of the platform. We do have to invest to reduce the costs around CDS. We have to reduce the costs of running it. I won't tell you what the numbers are, but CDS costs us more to run than Chief did. Now, they're not comparable, and let me touch on that in a second. They're not the same thing, but it does cost us a lot of money, and everything that we can save from running CDS means that we have more money to spend on things that are actually more useful. And we also have to look at the cost of changing it, both the actual cost, but also the time. So we have got to a position with CDS where it does, I think, everything it needs to do. I mentioned it doesn't do them particularly efficiently. One of the things that, for example, is not particularly good is if you add a new location. Getting that location code updated on CDS takes an awful lot longer than it should. I won't bore you with the details of why that is, but it does mean that there's built-in cost of change. Updating the tariff is more complicated in CDS than it was in Chief. Now, there are lots of reasons for that. But again, these things have practical impacts for those of you who are looking to use CDS, and it builds in cost to us to do with kind of the major changes. The really, again, caveated with, I don't know what, if anything, we'll have in the spending review, is we need to invest across all 4 of those areas. We need a longer-term investment approach, which actually says it's as important to invest in the stability of the platform as it is to deliver this high-value, critical piece of code. And I appreciate that that's probably a change from where we have been in the import and the export journey, where an awful lot of the changes were about enabling you and customers to start using CDS to do things. One of the things we need to do as we move to that steady state is look at investing across all of that to make sure that we keep CDS evergreen in that phrase. Very last point I want to touch on. I don't know how I'm really sorry. I'll be really quick. So HMRC is looking at introducing a slightly different way of looking at the things it does. There's a concept called regime ownership. So there will be somebody who owns the customs regime. Don't ask me why we ended up with regime. I didn't have a choice in that. Within that process, there's a thing called business platform owners and value stream owners. Let's not go there. But I'm the interim business platform owner for CDS. One of the challenges is that because CDS has been around for so long and so many programs have a view on it and demands of it, is we didn't really have a single person who was looking after CDS, who owned CDS as a thing, as a business platform, if you will. So we're developing this new role. We're doing it as part of that regime ownership piece. Ultimately, it will be about making sure that the investment, that the platform delivers the outcomes that everybody who uses it need, but it will be about directing the investment across those 4 areas. The good thing is when you're doing a test and learn is that you can get it horribly wrong and learn, and that's okay. Everyone thinks you're great anyway. So that's the situation we're in. I don't know what effect that will be for how users of CDS will actually experience that. I guess if we're doing well, it'll slowly get better. but you shouldn't see any of the internal machinations. I'm really sorry for overrunning that, Des. I'm around for a bit if anybody has any questions, and thank you very much.
We're going to have one question from Lorenzo.
Hi, thanks for that.
Can I use my get out of jail free card instead?
No,
There's a budget next week.
you're not getting one of those, no. As you can probably tell, I'm an old geezer and was involved right at the beginning on the trade side with CDS, right at the beginning, and went through a lot of the different iterations. We were, as trade, sold something, and that something was a system that would be better than Chief. And I think in terms of responsiveness, speed of sending and receiving responses, that's great, although we need to wait for 4 responses and you've got a 10-minute timeout that no one inland really wants, but there you go, that's life. We were sold a system that would provide us with more data in an easily digestible format. We were sold a system that would have, as a minimum, Chief functionality and tax functionality, and I think that where we are now, and I'm also involved in the JCCC, and I do owe Ian Wilkins an email about moving funds around, and we accept now CDS is out of that protected zone, and you need to ask for funds. But when we get messages like, the MSS replacement within CDS might, and the word is might be available in March, but we can't guarantee it. That just says to us, well, you're looking at the wrong areas. When we have functionality, critical functionality in a lot of areas to do with, one of them is import VAT and ownership and all of that sort of cobblers that lots of people have to deal with now. Mm-hmm. When it's sitting there in the tariff completion rules, but we're told by relatively senior members of HMRC, we didn't write the code, and we don't know when the code will be in CDS. That's really concerning for trade, and it sort of leads to where you're talking about effectively bang for your buck, mm-hmm. And it just feels like in a lot of areas you're looking at and you're spending money on things that are could be, by miserable suds like me, referred to as emperor's new clothes, rather than putting that money into something really important that is CDS. That's a platform that we all have to use in terms of import-export. Now, that's probably not a question, that's just me moaning. But we did a round robin around a couple of the JCCC working groups to ask them the question. It was specifically about, do you want money put into single trade window when single trade window isn't really going to deliver what you want, or would you rather that money go towards CDS and proper development of CDS? And in the main, the vast majority of people said, if single trade window is going down the route that it's going down, then no, we don't want that money spent there. We want it spent on CDS. And I think that's, when you talk about coming out to trade and asking about that, they're the sorts of crunchy issues you need to be talking about. Sorry, I don't know if there's an answer.
Well, so I was wondering when Ian Wilkins would get a mention. Those of you who know him, he will remind me of this regularly. So he's unfortunately championing your viewpoint in terms of what the original vision of CDS was. My reflection is that when you look to replace a platform with another one, you need to be really clear if you're replacing it or replicating it. I suspect that people were not entirely clear which they meant. So CDS is architectured differently from Chief. This might be controversial, but parts of HMRC don't know how their system is used. Split shipments being a great case in point. It has, I would say CDS is less permissive than Chief was, and I think we should have said that we are replacing it with a customs engine that allows you to make declarations and not replicating the functionality of Chief. But I absolutely take the point. Lots of people from HMRC, I'm sure, have said to you that you'll get something which is as good as or better. And we have not yet delivered that.
Sorry, and easier to change. That was the other thing. Easier to change.
Again, I could not disagree with that. It is not easy or cheap or straightforward to make changes to CDS. We need to fix that going forward because we're going to be using CDS for, well, Chief lasted 32 years, I think, something like that. 34. 30, quite a while anyway. There you go, 30 years, yeah. So if, we've got another 20 years of CDS if we go as long. Certainly at that stage, I don't think I'll care about it either, frankly. Yeah.
Alan, thank you very, very much.
All right.
We do unfortunately need to move on. Thank you. And Lorenzo, you do have the opportunity to use ACITA as your voice. So Alan has said we can hound him. We will definitely hound him. Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
You need no introduction. Please go ahead.
Oh, are these two working? That's okay to use these? It's okay to use these two?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you, brilliant. I'm sorry, I didn't want to deprive anyone of the opportunity for questions if necessary. I'm conscious that we originally were down for 15 and we went to 20, so I'm quite happy to run through this a little bit quicker. Just to say with some of the slides that we've got, they are in there very much more for the fact that you are able to download them. Kevin uploads them afterwards, and therefore we won't skip over any of the information. It'll still be available to everybody, but to do that. But what I'll do is I'll run through a little bit of what we have on safety and security first. We basically intended to cover 3 key areas today. The first being safety and security, the second being modernising authorisations, and the third being customs guidance and the technical handbook. These being 3 of our sort of key areas at the moment. Others have touched on the budget uncertainty and things like that. We'll try and give a bit of a flavour of what we're seeing behind the scenes as much as we can, but obviously these things are still very much under wraps. So the key headlines to take away really is in August of 2023, we announced that we published what was called the Border Target Operating Model at the time. That provided a forward look of changes that we were going to provide, covering SPS, covering safety and security, covering other functional areas at the same time. We had some deadlines in that document. Key of which for safety and security was the 31st of October deadline for the introduction of safety and security checks on goods imported from the EU to Great Britain, with the various things that have happened in the interim, regime change, the need to cite new ministers and allow them an opportunity to make decisions on policies before they take effect, etc. An agreement was made and announced in the last couple of weeks that we would move on to a 31st of January deadline, and that date was decided in large part on the basis of sort of continuous feedback from industry that doing things in December and November in particular is not an ideal time. So what we have done is we have put it through to there. There is, however, the opportunity for those who have the data readily available to provide, to submit that information in advance. One of the slides I've not put in the deck today that we often use elsewhere is one that is jointly with Border Force, and I'm conscious, Des, that Border Force weren't able to attend today, so I didn't want to speak on their behalf, but nonetheless to say that they very much see safety and security data as an opportunity to improve compliance, to be more targeted, to have less of an impact on goods movements that don't need to be affected, and so very much there is a move to encourage early submission of data, and then Border Force run through their sort of compliance strategy, and the first part is considering that data to make sure that everything is targeted, and then there is an element of identifying people, communicating with them, providing education, and then compliance as a sort of a last resort end product of everything there. So I don't think that for time purposes this is necessarily the audience that needs to know what a safety and security declaration is, and so forth. Nonetheless, it's worth saying that we have always intended to introduce safety and security declarations. It is part of our international obligations. It is something that we provided a temporary waiver period for during the transition around the introduction of customs controls between the UK and the EU. It is something that we were committed to doing. We have gone to a point where we don't want to keep delaying and delaying and delaying, and we want to put a marker down for industry to be able to aim for. So again, this is all information that is provided mainly for the purposes of members being able to access the slides through the members area in due course, so I don't intend to speak to all of it, but it gives you an idea of who is responsible for the declaration, and on the next slide that we'll get to, the time limits for doing that. These are not sort of particularly different or anything to what they have been before, and obviously we're conscious that people who are moving goods on rest of world movements are already complying with these anyway, which is a part of the opportunity for early submission, because obviously people who have got data who are dealing with EU and other areas of movements would do that. So in order to actually make your declarations, you can be registered for the Safety and Security SNSGB service. So you need your EORI, you need your gateway account. These are all things that people who are worried about the January 31st deadline can be getting in hand already, even if you're only an EU movement, only responsible for EU movements. And then at the bottom here, there's a couple of links again on the slides, not useful for links for not being able to press them, but for actually the relevant guidance and information that's provided there for all of you. This is probably most of interest to ACITA members. It's around declarations for a third party, and obviously that needs to be with the carrier's knowledge and consent, and as it says, the carrier remains responsible for the declaration and ensuring it's submitted within time limits. But again, there's guidance available online for anyone who is approaching this for the first time, and I'm sure ACITA members aren't approaching it for the first time, but we cater for everyone, and to say, there's information available there. Again, there's the important points here at the bottom of the 2 bullet points, which are around legal liability, which remains with the carrier, and the information being accurate, the responsibility lies with the person making the declaration itself. So there's a necessity for us and for Border Force to be able to identify who is responsible. So for anyone who is operating as a broker or anything along those lines, that is relevant information. One of the simplifications that we sought to make, that we spoke to you on the previous occasion, was around making data fields either conditional or optional, and being clearer on what those data fields were, when they were conditional, when they were optional, and obviously anything that is optional can be submitted if those want to. That information is available still in the border target operating model, and I've not included it on these slides today, although it was in the last time I think I presented. So for anyone who's got a good memory, I think it was October last year, I believe, Des, was the last one of these that I attended, so I'm pretty sure I covered it there. And then in terms of readiness support, the guidance has been updated. We have also got a landing page, which we've provided a link to, and I think, Des, you will have received it as a J3C member, and I'm hoping you've cascaded it to the members accordingly. So perfect. So there is a landing page, which is, we have a bit of a strange position with the way that Gov UK works, which is that we can only publish guidance that covers what is supposed to be done at the time when the guidance is read. So we have an SNS landing page which allows us to provide updates for people to make sure they're informed and aware of what's going to happen in the interim between now and the 31st of January. So what I'll do is I'll put it back onto my slide. I'm going to hand over to JP. You'll be assured that Curlia, Michael and ourselves have agreed a dress code for today, so I will step over.
We have indeed, yeah. And I've actually got some points to make on my phone. I'm not just nonchalantly sending text messages while I'm presenting. That would be rude. So I'm John Paul Brett, same team as Ben, stakeholder engagement in customs. I think I was the one who presented on my own that time on sort of general customs updates in the spring conference, but I've brought my bodyguard with me today just in case. But the first point that I wanted to make, which kind of It relates to the whole sort of safety and security element, but also all the other kind of wider programs and changes that we have on the go in relation to borders and customs. And it's something, you know, Des touched on at the beginning, Alan's also alluded to as well. Obviously, you know, we've had quite a lot of change happening in government. You know, there's the spending review that's currently underway, the budget, which you know, advanced preparations are ongoing there. And in terms of our team, we're kind of like very much involved in a lot of those. But I do sort of appreciate and sympathise that that has meant, therefore, we've not been able to come out and engage as much as we normally would do on a lot of our projects. You know, safety and security, we weren't able to sort of come out to speak to people as early as we'd have liked to, hence why the decision was, I think, fortunately taken, that we would delay it for another 3 months. But now very much we can kind of ramp up that comms and engagement, as sort of Ben was talking through. But I do realise it means that some of our engagement hasn't been as sort of forthcoming as we would like and we would normally do. So just apologies for that, but thank you very much for your patience. And obviously, of course, you know, depending on the outcomes of the budget and our spending review, you know, things may well change and it might well impact on some of our future plans. Obviously, nothing that we can sort of speculate on right now. What we will do is obviously continue with our commitment to engage with yourselves. I know, looking around the room, there's people that we speak with directly. Obviously, there's ACITA, you know, we work very closely with yourselves and also more widely with the sort of Joint Customs Consultative Committee, so we will continue to sort of keep that dialogue and collaboration going. I guess the other thing to mention, like in light of the spending review and the budget, you know, single trade window, we've commented on it earlier. There's not much obviously we can say about that right now. You know, we recognise that the combination of the general election, new ministers, the budget preps has led to a restriction in our comms when it comes to single trade window. All I can say is work is sort of still ongoing around sort of like the testing phase. So we're testing the first release of single trade window and its functionality with a selection of users, and we'll continue to update industry stakeholders as that sort of develops. But obviously there's not much we can say right at this point about sort of timescales and sort of longer term scope. So I do know, like speaking on behalf of the single trade window colleagues, I'm not one of them, just in case I kind of get cornered at lunchtime. There is a kind of a commitment that when they can say more, they'll very much sort of come out and start doing that a bit more dynamically. So yeah, that's pretty much the limits of what I can say on that. So conscious I'm trying to make up a bit of time. Modernising authorisations, I mean, for those of you who were in the previous conference, people directly from this policy area came and gave a presentation. My sort of comment was just to sort of give a, you know, just in terms of like a summary of what the plan is for modernising authorisations. It's to very much sort of digitise, streamline all of those customs and excise authorisations into sort of 5 key groups, which are fiscal, simplifications and declarations, transit, ports and wharves, and AEO. And the plan is to offer that on a digital platform, which kind of allows easier ways to apply for, access, and sort of manage your authorisations as well. And also streamlining the application process. So ideally only asking you for information and you needing to tell us once. So if you've already applied for one authorisation and when you look to apply for another one, we would only ask additional questions that are relevant to the new authorisation that you're applying for. You don't have to go back over old ground. That's the sort of ambition for this. Lots happening in this space, as you would imagine. We've done a lot of work, again, with some people in this room and wider stakeholders and trade around building the guidance. And again, huge thanks to everybody who has sort of invested a lot of time and effort and given us some really helpful insight to support those kind of products that we are currently drafting. And we're doing a lot of work around like the legislation requirements, including the public notices that will contain all the sort of standard conditions for modernising authorisation. And obviously one of the key things will be an evaluation strategy, and we'll do it as we sort of deliver phases. We'll continually look to improve and sort of evaluate how things are going. So yeah, lots and lots of work happening there. In terms of timescales, I think the plan is that we will initiate the first kind of test phase next month, so late in November. We're going to use the time between now and then, and that additional time to prioritise that sort of plans for that user testing, to make sure that the product that does go live, when the rubber hits the road, it really kind of works for users, and it's not just like a conceptual thing. It actually meets what's required. So that is a absolutely key test for us, and why we're looking to prioritise user testing. And yeah, a few more steps. There are continued, as well as the plans for the testing, and then moving to sort of that live environment. There's a few more products, a few more pages of guidance that needs to be finalised, and again, working really closely with industry to do that and get that over the line. So I'm really conscious of time. I'm going to cover this very quickly in 30 seconds, and along with the gov.uk kind of guidance that we have at the moment, the standard sort of guidance, which is user-focused, step-by-step guidance, task-driven on what you need to do across a range of customs topics. We're also looking to complement that by introducing some much more detailed technical customs technical handbooks, which will look to provide wider context, legislative interpretation, and things in a level of detail that is more for, dare I say, the sophisticated user, people who are more experienced in customs matters, not just generically for everybody. We are working really closely with industry to sort of develop those. We haven't actually published any just yet, because a lot of them will have kind of a web into modernising authorisations and things like that. And so what we want to do is make sure that when we first publish these handbooks, they work in lockstep with the new developments from modernising authorisations. Hence why we haven't delivered any yet. But they are very close to being launched. Again, working really closely with a trade. So we do have a JCCC sort of subgroup which looks at guidance specifically, and we are testing these draft customs technical handbooks with colleagues there and wider in trade. And again, for anybody who has been involved with that, I'd just say thank you, because we've had an awful lot of really insightful comments that we've worked through to hopefully get the products that we do deliver really in a good shape that will be hopefully very useful. We've had some really positive feedback to date. So that will be for more technical audiences with greater knowledge of customs. And yeah, you can hopefully expect to see the first few of those coming online in the not too distant future. And that was me very quickly rattling through the last couple of slides. So I don't know if there are any questions for time for questions, or you can always corner us at lunchtime.
Yeah, I think that's what we're going to have to do. If we have any questions for them, we'll need to grab them at lunch. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And I don't think there has been a single presentation that hasn't mentioned transit this time, this far. So Sharon is here to update us on transit. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Sharon Heron. I'm a Policy and International Engagement Lead within the Transit team within HMRC. Yes, there has been a lot of discussion on transit. I'm here today to talk about NCTS, which I know is not everyone's favourite topic, so please be gentle with me. So, how did migration from NCTS phase 4 to 5 go? So we did a split approach for deployments, with Northern Ireland going live at the end of June, followed by GB going live on the 1st of July. And phase 5 service has successfully processed over 400,000 movements. There's quite a lot of detail on these slides, so I won't go into all of them, but you will get to see them afterwards in terms of stats and things. Since that time, the service has not experienced any instances of unplanned downtime, nor have any Priority 1 defects been identified. We planned on deploying our first major code release since the go live. That was on the 28th of September, which was to address any minor issues identified since the initial release. Following go live, we have carried out extensive lessons learnt activity, both internally and externally, to better understand how we can build on the success of the full NCTS 5 rollout in January 25. One of the key themes identified was around limitations with the current trader test environment, and we are exploring extra test scenarios ahead of the full January 25 release. This is just a bit of a roadmap that shows how we're going to get to final state. So as I mentioned, 28th of September, we had the code release. 2nd of December, that is the date when all national administrations should be on phase 5, although it has been already alluded to earlier that some of them are going to be slightly later than that. But the 22nd of January is when final state for core NCTS 5 must take place. We do have a lot of comms planned, so this is our road plan from October. At the beginning of October, we announced about the Office of Incident and Commodity Codes. We also had a webinar which was around the fixed defects and Office of Incidents and more commodity codes. Coming up, we have in 8th November, we've got the new data fields information. Followed by, on the 26th, there is a webinar that's going to be around new data fields and multiple house consignments. In December, we're going to have a further update on multiple house consignments, and then we go into January, which will have kind of a couple of further webinars just to give a recap on all of that information. So, what's changing from the 22nd of January for final state? So, it introduces 6 changes that result in either a process change or changes in completion of the transit declaration. So, firstly, removal of the mandatory requirement for a paper TAD, or the paper transit accompanying document, which would accompanies a transit movement. Secondly, electronic presentation of the movement reference number, or the MRN, for inbound movements. Thirdly, commodity codes. There will be a mandatory requirement to enter commodity codes for each goods item on a transit declaration, which is currently voluntary in transitional states. Fourth, pre-lodged declarations and also the ability to amend. So the ability to select an additional declaration type D, that will enable you to pre-lodge a transit declaration. So this pre-lodged declaration can be amended up to 30 days in advance of the movement of the goods and can be finalised by sending a new message notification. There is also the Office of Incident. Drivers will need to report serious incidents in real time by reporting to a Customs Office of Incident. In the UK, that's all current offices of departure, destination and transit will now become Office of Incidents, where the customs officer will record the details directly onto NCTS 5. And we have given a link there, so that gives a list of all customs offices on the Europa website. And lastly, multiple house consignments. So you will need to declare your goods at house consignment level, which means grouping the goods according to the consignor or consignee rather than declaring them at item level. So previously, if I was sending oranges, lemons and limes, I would then have to put that for every single item. So now that's going to be changed. So house consignments can be declared in 3 different ways. So multiple consignors sending goods to a single consignee, or multiple consignees receiving goods from a single consignor, or multiple consignors or consignees in a single movement, such as groupage loads. In addition to that, the size of the declaration will increase and it will allow you to declare up to 1,999 house consignments in a single transit declaration. Each house consignment can contain up to 999 line items. However, the declaration may not contain more than the 1,999 line items in total. What data is changing on the transit declaration? So we've analysed the data in P4 against the requirements for Phase 5, transitional and final state, and we are producing a correlation table that we will share with you all. Our analysis has verified that apart from commodity codes and consignor-consignee information at house consignment level, that's where the multiple house consignments are used, there are no new data requirements. However, there are a small number of changes in optionality of the data. I can see the date on here is slightly wrong. So we're aiming to share that data correlation table from the week of the 14th of October. That has been delayed, but I am reliably informed, she says, crossing her fingers, that that information should be available by the end of this week. So final state rules for the paper TAD on outbound movements. So from the 22nd of January, the requirement for a paper TAD to accompany the goods during a transit movement will cease. So what does that mean for drivers starting a movement at a UK port? So once Border Force have released goods into transit, they will no longer routinely print off the TAD for the driver. It's expected that the MRN can be communicated to the driver by the declarant via the haulier. However, if this is not possible, the driver can request from Border Force to provide them with the MRN and ask for a paper copy of the top sheet of the TAD. If the driver would like a copy of the TAD to include the list of items, then they would have to specifically request that to be printed by Border Force, and they must make that very clear that's what they require. So final state rules for electronic presentation of the MRN on inbound movements into the UK. So from the 22nd of January, for inbound transit movements coming into a port in the UK, the MRN will need to be presented in the following ways. So at GVMS ports, that would be by inputting all the transit MRNs into a GMR within the GVMS for goods contained in the vehicle. This means that if the driver is stopped to complete an Office of Transit check or required by Border Force to end a transit movement, Border Force will ask the driver for the GMR, and that includes the transit MRNs for that load. By not including all the relevant transit MRNs in the GMR, this may result in financial penalties over time. And at non-GVMS ports, this would be by presenting the transit MRNs as a linear barcode, which can be displayed on either a phone or a tablet, or carrying the top sheet of the paper TAD for Border Force to scan the MRN. In early to mid-December, we will issue a public notice stipulating the MRN requirements at each port and to complete the Office of Transit and Destination. And there will also be a draft PDF version of a revised Transit Customs Handbook, which we formally referred to as Transit Manual Supplement, and that will include all the changes introduced from final state, and that will be published ahead of the full publishing on January 25 on gov.uk. We also have started to create a directory for presentation of the MRN from final state. So we have been told by our traders that this would be really useful to have because they wanted to know what other member states and contracting parties were doing and how they would accept it. We initially lobbied TAXUD in the Commission to get this information, but we were met with reluctance to help us with that. But they did say we could go ahead and start that initiative ourselves, which we have. We worked alongside Switzerland, and we started to develop a bit of a directory, which I'll just show you on here, of various countries. So at the moment, I think we've got about 8 countries, which includes Netherlands, France, Spain, Ukraine, various other countries. I'm pleased to say, as a result of our initiative, TAXUD had a change of heart and felt it would be beneficial for everyone to have this directory. So they have spoken to us, and we have asked that that information be available hopefully by the end of October, because our software developers can then start to develop that into our systems, and that information will be published by TaxUD as soon as possible. So NCTS 6, the big question, are we opting into TSADs? So phase 6 is planned to be implemented on the 1st of September 25. It allows contracting parties to offer transit users the ability to make a combined safety and security and transit declaration, which is called TSAD. C2C members can decide whether to introduce this or not. If members opt out from the 1st of December, there is the option to opt in again at a later date. The UK has decided to opt out of TSADs from the 1st of September, but we are reserving the right to opt in at a future date. By opting out, we can then deliver the core elements of phase 6 by the 1st of September, and we can remain compliant with the asks from the C2C. For us, the IT build then will be much simpler and less costly to build for software developers, and it should have minimal to no impact on trade. In the meantime, we do plan to consult with businesses to really understand the benefits of TSADs and to make that final decision on whether we will opt in at a future date. And what's new for opt-out countries? So phase 6 introduces some changes to the Office of Transit process in the addition of the new Office of Transit state. So it's arrival accepted at Office of Transit and a separation between goods arriving at the Office of Transit and subsequently being approved or declined passage across the border. However, it is our intention that border processes will remain unchanged for businesses. There will be some modifications to the existing message data and conditions. But at the moment, although there'll be small changes to the message structure, that may result in slightly some of the software being modified, but at the moment we're still really working through that and what that will mean. Have we got time for any questions?
Lunchtime, if that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you very, very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
I think, thank you, Customs. I mean, how you pulled that back together for me, I have absolutely no idea. Really appreciate it. So you can rely on HMRC. Thank you very much. For the guests, for guests here, I mean, bear in mind, if you want to copy these slides, just contact Kevin if you don't have access to our website, and he will make them available to you.
I'll send them anyway. So, ladies, gentlemen, lunch is served. Hors d'oeuvres, starters are both ends of the room. Desserts also down both ends of the room. Teas and coffees are down there. The wine and everything's in the middle of the room. Please keep an eye out for the waiters because they're serving the bowl food. So just grab them when they come past, and there's different sorts of foods on there. We've only got an hour for lunch because we've run over, so I apologise about that, but please enjoy it, and we shall see you back after lunch.